All right, so for today's class, here's what we're going to kind of talk about. Is in section 6.6, you're going to be looking at dividing radical expressions. So as you take a look at dividing rational expressions here, here's our objective is I can simplify radical expressions by what's called rationalizing the denominator. That's going to be what's kind of important today, is what's called rationalizing the denominator. Now, just short little history, rationalizing the denominator comes from all the way back before calculators could do square roots. And so what they did was they rationalized the denominator so that they could approximate to a certain number of decimals. We still do that today to simplify rational expressions and radical expressions. So the final rule involving radicals is that you cannot leave radicals in your denominator. So that is kind of our last rule that we have to follow, is what's up at the very top of that box there, no radicals in the denominator. Now, the process of getting rid of the radicals is what is called rationalizing, or rationalizing the denominator. So here are kind of the steps to dividing radicals. Step 1, simplify the fraction first if possible. Step 2, simplify the radicals if possible. And then in step 3, you're going to rationalize. In other words, it's the process of eliminating the radical on the denominator. And so you will multiply by the same radical as what is in the denominator. So anytime you look to rationalize, you multiply by the same exact radical as what you find in the denominator. Now, you have to multiply in two different places. You have to multiply in both your numerator as well as denominator. All right, so let's take a look at a couple examples here today. Very first example that we come to is example A here, where you've got 5 over the square root of 2. So, very first thing is we need to simplify if possible. And in this case, we can't do anything. 5 squared root of 2, nothing we can do there. So instead, what we do is we jump all the way to rationalizing. And what it said to do was multiply by the same radicals what we see in our denominator. In other words, where you saw square root of 2, you need to multiply by square root of 2 in both numerator and denominator. Now, when you do that, a couple things are going to happen. Where you see in your numerator 5 times the square root of 2, that stays as 5 times square root of 2. Now, denominator actually comes from what we did yesterday when we talked about multiplying radicals. And we said if you're multiplying by the same radical, in this case, square root of 2 times square root of 2, you end up with just whatever number or variables underneath the radical. So for this one, square root of 2 multiplied by the square root of 2, you just get the number 2. And that would be what you'd leave as your final answer. All right, so another example here. Let's take a look at example B, very next one to look at. For example B, where you have the square root of 36 over 4, very first thing you need to do is, if possible, simplify what's underneath first. So take a look at 36 over 4. If I want to simplify that, 36 divided by 4 gives me 9. And so what I can simplify is say that square root of 36 over 4 would be the same as square root of 9. And then to simplify, really only one more step to go, square root of 9 would just be the number 3. And you would be done. All right, take a look at example C here. Now, sometimes that won't always work out. Like if you take a look at example C, there's nothing we can do in order to simplify, at least at first, where you see a 1 over 36. 1 over 36 is still going to be a fraction, no matter how you slice it. So instead, here's kind of a trick that we've got. It's similar to how we broke up multiplication. And we said multiplication was basically where you take two things that are multiplied together and you can break them up into two separate radicals. Same idea works for division. In other words, what you can do is you can break this radical up and say the square root of 1 over the square root of 36. Now, what's nice about that is then you can just simplify piece by piece. In other words, in your numerator, where you have the square root of 1, the square root of 1 is just the number 1. Similar to in your denominator where you've got the square root of 36. The square root of 36 is just the number 6. And once you simplified, you're actually done. There was no rationalizing that you had to do. That would be your final answer. All right, let's take a look at some more examples here. Example D, same idea as example B, where in B, if you take a look here, we divided first. Then we said 36 divided by 4 was 9. Square root of 9 gave us 3. Example D, very similar, in that we can go ahead and divide 8 over 2 gives us a 4. So we could simplify and say square root of 4. One more step to go here. Square root of 4, you think about what number squared gives you a 4. That number would be a 2. There would be your final answer. Alrighty. Next example here. Example E is going to work just like example A. If you take a look at example A here, where we had in our denominator a square root of 2. And there was nothing else we could do to simplify, so we had to get rid of that by multiplying by the square root of 2. Same idea with example E. In example E, you would just be multiplying by the square root of 3 this time instead, because you had a square root of 3 in your denominator. That is what you'll multiply by. Now, in numerator, once again, you would be taking 4 multiplied by the square root of 3 is just 4 square root of 3. Nothing to simplify there. Don't write square root of 12. Please, please, please. Okay, now denominator. Square root of 3 multiplied by the square root of 3. There's kind of our special rule. You're multiplying two values that are both the same square root. Square root of 3 and square root of 3. That simplifies to just be whatever was underneath, which is the number 3. Alrighty. Example F. Take a look here. Example F actually works just like example E. In fact, this would be a good point to pause the video and try it on your own. Alright, so example F works very similar. Here's a chance to check your work here. With example F, starting by multiplying by the same square root as what is underneath your fraction. So in this case, square root of 5 and square root of 5. Now, in numerator, 3 multiplied by the square root of 5, you end up with just 3 square root of 5. Denominator, however, where you had square root of 5 and square root of 5, it's the same square root of 5. So what you would do is you would say square root of 5 times square root of 5. I just get the number that's underneath my radical, in this case, the number 5, and you would be done. All right, a few more examples to look at, and we'll call it a day here. Example G, things get a little bit tricky. So, follow carefully, we'll get through it. With example G, here's what you have to look at, is there isn't anything you can do to simplify it first, because square root of 5 and square root of 3, you can't divide those, you just have to leave them. Instead, here's kind of what we can do, is where you got square root of 3 in your denominator. You are going to still multiply by the square root of 3. Now, where you need to be careful is in your numerator when you multiply. The negative 4 has nothing to multiply with, so it stays a negative 4. But your square root of 5 multiplied by the square root of 3 gives you the square root of 15. Now, square root of 15 you can't simplify, so that's kind of nice because you have to just leave it. Denominator though, where you've got square root of 3 times square root of 3, once again, I'm hoping you're starting to see the pattern, that just gives you the number 3. And just like that, you are done. So, not too bad. Not a whole lot of simplifying to do, makes that one go pretty smooth. All right, example H here is going to keep being a little bit tricky. So, with example H, here's what you've got to keep in mind, is when you go through here and you multiply by the same square root as what you have in your denominator. In other words, you multiply by square root of 2 and square root of 2. What you need to make sure and do is in your numerator, put square root of 5 minus 1 in parentheses. That will help to remind you that you're going to have to distribute when you multiply. In other words, square root of 5 multiplied by the square root of 2, you multiply underneath your radicals and get the square root of 10. But when you take negative 1 multiplied by the square root of 2, there's nothing you can simplify. So you have to leave it as a minus 1 square root of 2. Denominator here, as we go to simplify, square root of 2 multiplied by the square root of 2, once again, same radical. What you do is just leave it as the number 2. So when it simplifies, you just get the number 2. There would be your final answer. Now, square root of 10 and square root of 2 in your numerator will not simplify. If you wanted to get rid of the 1, I guess you could get rid of the 1 and just say square root of 10 minus square root of 2. But there's nothing else you could do at that point to really make it any more simple. All right, final example to look at for today is example I. Example I actually works very, very similar to example H. In fact, here's what I want you to do on your own real quick here. Pause the video, try example I on your own. All right, here we go. So checking our work here. We are going to be multiplying by the square root of 3 in both numerator and denominator. So when we go through and do that, keep in mind one thing you want to make sure and do, put 3 plus square root of 2 in parentheses. Now, as we go through here and we multiply, keep in mind you need to be sure and distribute. 3 multiplied by the square root of 3, you just get 3 square root of 3. Next, square root of 2 multiplied by the square root of 3. You get a positive square root of 6. All of that divided by, you take square root of 3 multiplied by square root of 3. That leaves you with just a 3. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that you might be sitting there and noticing, well, I've got a 3 here and a 3 here. Can I divide those and simplify? And the answer is no, because you are missing a square root of, or a number of 3, a number divisible by 3 in front of your square root of 6. So for this one, you would have to leave your final answer as this 3 square root of 3 over, or 3 square root of 3 plus square root of 6 over 3. Let me get that circle off of 3 here if I can. And so your final answer should have been a 3 square root of 3 plus square root of 6 over 3. All right, keep in mind, guys, some stuff that's going to be coming up here very, very soon. Today, as you take a look at these notes, and I'm going to have these posted on Schoology for you, so if you miss anything, you can rewatch the video or you can go online and copy those down from Schoology. Keep in mind that you will have a test. It is coming up on block day. So when I see you again on Wednesday, we are going to review the first part of class, and that'll give us about an hour and 15 minutes to review. With the last 10 or 15 minutes, we are going to start the test. So make sure that you have worked through some of the review and you're ready to go. Now, we will finish the test up on Friday. That'll give you a chance to, on Wednesday night and Thursday night, go over anything else that you think you might want to study, and then we'll finish the test on Friday. So, some stuff that I want you to make sure you have done. Due on Wednesday. I will expect to see worksheet 6.6, which is over on the blue cart for you. When you pick that up, also pick up your review for Unit 6. The Unit 6 review will be due on the day of the test, and so I will take that as late as Friday. Keep in mind, for the first time ever, that will be worth 10 points that will go in the gradebook as actual points. So you will get points for those. All right, so just a refresher. Due on Wednesdays, worksheet 6.6. We'll spend Wednesday going over questions. You will have a homework quiz most likely, and then we will review. After the review, we will spend about 10 or 15 minutes on test, followed by on Friday, you will have the remainder of the test to complete. On Friday, make sure you've got your reviews with you. If you don't turn them in on Wednesday, those are going to be worth 10 points. All right, you got lots to work on today. Make sure you get it done. I want to have lots of good comments when I come back on Wednesday. Have a good Tuesday, guys. I'll see you back a little bit later.